Hello. Happy New Year, everybody. How are you? We are live. We're going to talk about stats. It's going to be fun. Just giving it a minute to let it pop up over on YouTube. This should be a good time. It always takes like a little while. Oh, here we go. I see it coming up. Hi. How is everybody? So I'm really excited about this. The stats video is one of my favorite videos that I do every year, and this year I'm doing it live for the first time, which is a little bit of an experiment. So we'll see how this goes. Hi Beth. Hi Renee. Hi Veronica. Ooh, from Sweden. Cool. Awesome. I'm glad you could make it. Okay, so I did something a little bit similar for my favorite books of the year live stream earlier this month, where I have a slideshow ready for you with figures and charts and things, of course, because we're talking stats, so we definitely need those. So I'm going to give it a couple minutes to let people kind of come in. Hello, good morning. And then we will get started. It's always really fun. I like to geek out about this stuff. I track a lot of things on my reading spreadsheet, which I've talked about before. And I like to look at my data and see kind of how it compares to earlier years and what it says about my reading, what I can learn from it, and share it with everybody else. So hi, Dana from Trinidad and Tobago. Awesome. Welcome. Hello. Hello. Yay. I'm so glad. Beth, yes, in Texas. Hello. I'm glad so many people can make it. Yay for stats. I love that there are so many of you guys who are also as nerdy about this as I am because I think it's really fun. Hi, Jenna. All right, let's do this. Oh, thank you. Hello. Happy New Year. Welcome. All right, I have, ta-da. I have a nice little slideshow for you that I made. I've been playing with Google Slides, which is fun. Yes, I have a little bit of comparison, not as much as in previous years, but I am going to do a little bit of that. We're going to talk about it. Hey, Michelle. Hello. Yay. Pacific Northwest. Okay, beautiful. Love it. Hello. I've got lots of people here today. This is exciting. All right, here we go. Let's begin. We're going to start with some basics, and this is where you're going to get some of my comparisons. Okay, so overall, this year I read a total of 402 books, which is more than I have read before. Last year, I mean, I didn't write down the exact numbers. I actually could tell you because if I looked at Goodreads, how many I read. But I want to say I read around 365-ish, 365, 368 last year. So this year I read more. My pages read is increased, and you can look at my monthly reading on here. I read what ends up being about 370 pages per day on average. But if you look at my months, you can see that there's a lot of variation. So the way this works is the columns up at the top are going to show you the year. I began tracking in 2017 because that's the year that I started my BookTube channel. And I had my second child in December of 2016. So as you can see, I did almost no reading while he was a small infant. But my average monthly reads in 2017 was 5.4 books, and we've jumped all the way up to 33.5 in 2021, which is up a bit from last year. I would expect to maybe see this go down slightly for 2022. If you notice, I was reading a lot more books per month, and when I look at the pages that I was reading per month, it was also higher for the first part of the year. And then I think what happened was around September, I got TikTok. And those numbers dropped a little bit. My highest reading month of the year, which I've got some little arrows pointing to, in 2021 was March with 39 books. I think that's the most I've ever read. And my lowest one was November with 25 books. So interesting to see kind of how things have changed over the years. You can see me slowly reading more and more, but I don't know, like I think we're probably gonna find it, somewhere in between when we get there. Hello. We've got some new people joining. Hi. Oh, this is interesting. The comparisons are fun. They're They're very interesting. And yes, TikTok. TikTok is a bit of a time suck, so that's fun. This year I had 21 DNFs, which I think is like similar to or maybe slightly lower from last year. I will get into my DNF statistics when I'm going to do a whole video on my DNFs, and so I'll talk about those specifically in that video. But yeah, 21 this year, and I didn't read a lot of translated works this year. Only 5 of the books that I read were translated fiction, which is about 1% of my reading. So yeah. All right, moving on, we're going to talk a little bit about book size and format. I've got a couple slides for this. First up, you can see this histogram with the page counts of the books that I was reading. And as you can see, my most frequently read page counts were probably right around the 350 mark. And then I also read a lot around 400. So we've got some scattered down to very, very short, probably short stories, graphic novels under 100 pages, and my highest being over 1,000. So you can kind of see that scattering, but on average, most of the books that I was reading were in that 350 to 400 page length. Although I did read a lot of novellas this year, and I think that's part of why you can see we've got higher bars to the left side of this histogram than the right. In terms of format, audiobooks have made up a huge part of my reading ever since I started using them. And that's interesting. So this year, 48.3% of my reading was audiobooks. So I do listen to those. I get a lot of questions about how I read as much as I do, and that is part of it. Audiobooks help. Also, I don't watch much television. I mean, I read a lot. So yeah, 48.3% was audiobooks. Uncorrected proof, 20%. Really, that number is higher because some of those audiobooks were also uncorrected proofs or ARCs for review. And then, trade paperbacks at 12%, hardcovers at 6.5%. Yeah, it's kind of a variety. Mass markets are by far my smallest at only 2.5%, partly because I don't really enjoy reading mass market paperbacks. I'll do it occasionally for a romance, but in general, it's just not my favorite way to read. Let me take a quick look at the comments here. Look, I mean, I think that's great. It's I think it's interesting to look at like how things change over time, and everybody is different, and whatever you're doing is good. Um, Interesting. So yeah, we've got somebody saying shooting for about 50 a day. So yeah, we have like different things that we're aiming for. And I should say that when I say pages per day, that does include audiobooks. So it's not just physically reading per day. Hi, Katie. Yes, I love a PowerPoint too. It's fun. All right, let's move on to the next slide. More book size and format. So maybe unsurprisingly, most of my reading is novels. 84% of the things that I read this year were novels, but novellas actually make up the next biggest category at 7.5% of my reading. And I think they are probably overrepresented in at least my picks for best sci-fi and fantasy of the year. Novellas have been a big part of that, which is interesting. I've been reading a little more poetry, still not a huge part of my reading, but I've been reading more than I used to. So, we're getting there. The graphic novels is small, 3.5%. I would actually like to see that grow a little bit. I feel like even though graphic novels, I like them and they don't take very long for me to read, I will sometimes put them off a little bit. In terms of physical versus digital, I am reading more digitally. 70% of the books that I'm reading were digital. That could be either audiobooks or ebooks, but 30% of the books that I'm reading are physical books. So yeah. Libraries are great, especially for audio. I do a lot of audiobooks from my library as well, and I appreciate them. Okay, let's take a look at the genres and age breakdown and all of that I was reading this year. Genre. This is interesting. This is a little bit complicated to parse, I will say, because I have my romance split up into 3 different categories. So to get the full romance percentage, you have to add them together. So I've got contemporary, speculative, and historical. So when you put all of that together, we've got 16% contemporary, almost 7% speculative, almost 7% historical. So can I do math? About 30% of my reading was romance overall, and 31.3% was fantasy. So that makes up a huge chunk of my reading, right? Like over 60% of my reading was just fantasy and romance. This probably doesn't come as a big surprise to anybody who watches my channel regularly and watches my wrap ups. Those are usually my biggest categories of things that I'm reading. But almost 10% of my reading was sci-fi this year. So I'm happy to see that up. I know this year I wanted to read a little bit more sci-fi because I felt like it was really low last year. So that's good to see. And then what else? Nonfiction is 6.7%. I feel like I'm pretty good about getting to nonfiction and really putting it into my reading pretty regularly. And horror was 6%. That's been continuing to grow. I've really been enjoying horror quite a lot. Um, yeah. This makes sense. I do hear people saying that with working from home audio, I just do it around the house and doing errands and things. So yeah. Yes, I agree with this. I like trade paperbacks. Mass markets are harder. Although I do like they're now making some of these mass markets that are a little bit larger and floppier for some romances, and I do like those. So yeah, I think that's interesting. Uh I this is a good I don't know how to change it to pages. That's interesting. I sometimes do like how much more time you have, but I don't know how to do it with pages. Looking at first time reads versus rereads, this past year, 4.2% of the books that I read were rereads, which is better than the year before. That was another thing that I wanted to do was rereading more favorites, and I did that more than I had been, which is cool. Still, the majority of my reading is new to me books, but that's taking up a little bit more of a percentage than before, which I think is cool. And then in terms of target age group, again, not shocking, 70.6% of the books that I read were targeted at an adult audience. That is the majority of my reading is definitely that. YA has been shrinking. It's interesting because when I first started, the first couple of years that I had a YouTube channel, it was about half and half. Not even half and half. YA was more than half of what I was reading, and now it's like 24%. So seeing how much that has shifted is interesting. And then only 5.5% of my reading was middle grade. I do like it occasionally. It's just not what I reach for all the time. And it's been interesting. I see a lot of people transitioning to reading more adult titles. There are some great YA titles I still like, and I do still pick up some of them. I've just gotten a lot pickier. And, you know, I'm okay with that. Yes. It is a lot, but it's like most of what I spend time doing. Yeah, I pop in an audiobook all the time. I think it's very, very helpful. We have some people who like mass markets. They are portable. That is true. I do like that. All right. Publication dates. I do this every month for my stats, and it's kind of fun to look at it from like a big picture. So the earliest published book that I read this past year was 1817. That was Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen, which I actually read in December, which is interesting. I didn't read very many books published in the 1800s this past year. There were only 3 of them, which is 0.8% of the books that I read. I read 37 books published in the 1900s. So that made up almost 10% of my reading, which I'm actually pretty happy with. Then I kind of, this is a little bit arbitrary in terms of how I'm breaking it down, but 2000 to 2010 is 19 books, which is 5%. I had a bigger chunk of the 2010 to 2019 category, a little more recent, 22% of my reading. And then not, a decent amount of 2020 releases, 52, but 2021, I mean, almost half of my reading was books that came out in that current year. 195 of the books that I read were published in 2021, which makes sense given how much of my reading is for review. I'm reading predominantly front list titles, but I would like to read more classics, and I've been working on trying to make that a bigger part of my reading. And then I read 5 2022 releases, I think mostly in December, maybe one in November. Um, yes, I think that this is happening, and I do think it's interesting. Uh, so yeah. This is fair. This is fair. I agree. I love Northanger Abbey. I do think it's overrated. I think it's very entertaining. Yeah, Frankenstein would be fun. I do, I love Frankenstein. I would be up for doing a reread at some point. I think it's a great book. Okay, got all these things about this. 1800s. Yep. All right. Who, where, why? All right. So looking at publishers, again, this this is like maybe not the best way to do this because unfortunately the way I have my publishers set up is uh I really need to just make two categories. Maybe I'll think about doing that for this year because this is a little confusing. Part of the problem is that there are large publishers that have smaller imprints underneath them, and I like to track some of my favorite imprints. So for instance, Tor.com, they are published by Macmillan, but I don't track them as Macmillan. I track them as Tor because they're one of my favorite imprints and I want to see how many of their titles I'm reading in a given year. So for 2021, 9% of the books that I read were published by them. So I probably need to come up with a better system for this so that I can kind of have different tiers of imprints. So like Penguin Random House is 19.5%, but it's actually probably a little bit bigger because some of these other smaller imprints are also distributed by Penguin. It's a whole thing, but I was just curious. I do think it's interesting. I don't read very much Bloomsbury for whatever reason. Like only a 1.5% of my reading is from Bloomsbury. I read a lot of things that are coming out from Macmillan and Penguin Random House in general, a little bit from Orbit, which is published through Hachette. And then 15.5% of the books that I read were indie published, which is kind of a high percentage actually. And I think it's pretty interesting. Yes, they are colorful. Oh no. um, so yeah, I'm gonna have to do a little bit of thinking on a better way to show this for next year, but I like to see kind of where are the places that I'm reading from most often. And, if you look at my location or service, where are a lot of these books that I'm reading coming from? Uh, NetGalley is a big chunk of this. Like 23% of the books that I read in 2021 were from NetGalley. And, because a lot of it is for review, if you look at the other one, almost 53% of my reading was books for review versus things that I just picked up either for book clubs or read alongs or because I just wanted to read them. I would like to see that percentage shift a little bit in 2022. I do like reading a lot of things for review, but I want to have a little bit more breathing room. So I've been taking steps to try to, I know I said this last year, but I really am taking steps to try to decrease the number of books that I'm reviewing. I'd like to see that number, if I could get it down to like 40%, maybe that would be great. So we'll see what we can do in the new year. But I read a lot of things for review in 2021. Um, and yeah, library was helpful. 12.7% of my reading was from my library. Most of that is audiobooks. I get a lot of audiobooks from the library. And Amazon also, between Amazon and Audible, it's a big chunk of this. I'd like to see that be smaller in the coming year. Publisher, we've got like 8% of things that were sent to me from the publisher directly. So more things for review. And then I'm getting some stuff from Scribd and Libra FM and all these different things kind of make up pieces of the pie. So we'll see what we can do to shift some of these percentages going into the new year. Yes, that would be fun. It is, I will say putting this together is fun, but it's also very time consuming. And there is some level of limit to how much I can put into it when I'm doing lots of other videos too, but it is fun to look at. Author demographics. Okay, we have like two slides with this because I track a lot of things with author demographics, which I think is interesting. First up, let's look at gender. This is not surprising to me. I read predominantly female authors. I'm having trouble. I think this is like 74%. Like 74% of my reading is female authors. 20% is male. Like this is actually higher than last year, I think. I think last year I read more female authors than this year, which was still pretty high. And like a little over 3% is non-binary authors. So I'm fine with this as balance. I think it's fine. Author, country of origin. Um, okay, so maybe not surprisingly, I do read predominantly authors from the United States. So about 75% of the books that I read were from US authors. And I figured out somewhere that basically, and maybe I thought I may have put this on a different slide, which it might have made more sense to put it on the slide. But 11% of the books that I read were with authors who were not from the US, the United Kingdom, or Australia, which I'm counting as like the big Western publishing countries. So 45 books of what I read were from people outside of that, and kind of a mix of different countries where they were coming from. Okay. In terms of like race and ethnicity, I didn't quite hit my goal, but I came pretty close, which I'm pretty happy with. So from my monthly wrap ups where I talk about this, I'm aiming to try to read around half from Black, Indigenous, and person of color authors. That's what I'm aiming for. Overall, this year, about 54% of the books that I read were by white authors. So a little bit more than what I was aiming for, but like this is pretty close. I'm fairly happy with how this is looking. And then you can kind of see the variation and breakdown. I don't find this surprising. Indigenous books make up a bigger chunk than they have in the past, which is great. I was trying to prioritize that more. So 4.2% of books that I was reading were by Indigenous authors, 22.6 by Black authors, and then kind of a mix of other ethnicities. This makes sense given the books that I tend to pick up. And then I pretty much hit what I was aiming for in terms of queer representation. Every month, I'm aiming to read about 25% from LGBT authors. And overall, this year, about, I think this is like 26% of the books that I read were by queer authors. So kind of hit that right about where I wanted it to be. So that's great. So it's interesting to see. I look at it monthly to kind of see, am I kind of on track? And then it's nice to know that I was staying enough on track that by the end of the year, when I look at everything from a macro level, this is what we get. And I'm going to continue to try to do the same thing next year. Yes. Yeah, translated fiction is one good way to do that. And I also just think there are some great authors who are, even publishing in English who are from other countries. And so trying to be like aware of where authors are coming from to get different experiences, I think is good. All right. Um, what spreadsheet do you do it? Yeah. So there's a video that I made, I think sometime last month. It's like a plan with me video. And in that video, I'll after this, I can put the link to the spreadsheet I use in the video description here. But if you find that video, I talk about it and show the spreadsheet I use. These graphs I generated myself though, like I used that spreadsheet, but these aren't the graphs that were generated for me. I actually generated these in Google spreadsheets. So, all right, yeah, this is what I was talking about. Author, not US, UK, Australian, 45, so 11%. In terms of neurodiversity, 14.2% of the books that I read were by neurodiverse authors. And again, this is authors where I know that, where they're pretty open about it, or it's easy to see. The same with like disabled. This was a much smaller percentage. It's like very blurry on my screen, but like about 7%, I think, of the books that I read were by disabled authors. Those numbers are probably higher, but again, this is just going by the information that I have. I want to kind of track this and make sure that those are things that I'm including in my reading. And I guess this is one question. I know there are some people who will look more at the character representation, which I do track somewhat, but I like to focus more on who the author is, because I feel like it's also important to be hearing from voices of people with those specific experiences in general. So I look less at who are the characters in the books and more like who are the authors writing the books. And then in terms of debuts, about a quarter of the books that I read were from debut authors, and 75% were from previously published authors, which I just think is kind of interesting. There's always a lot of debuts every year, and sometimes I feel like this number would be higher because I feel like I'm so frequently reading debuts, but yeah, 25% for that. Okay, next we're going to look at my star ratings, and this is interesting. So I very rarely give out 1 or 1.5 star ratings, and so it's like if basically a book has to make me angry and I have to really hate it to give it a 1 or 1.5 stars. So in all of 2021, I read 402 books. Only 4 books got 1 star and 3 books got 1.5 stars. So less than 2% of the books that I read, I gave that rating to. So very pretty minimal. And then 2 and 2.5 stars is like, I didn't really like this, but I didn't hate it. And there might be some redeeming qualities. Those numbers are a little bit higher. 6% got 2 stars, 3% got 2.5 stars. Looking at this, again, if you watch my wrap ups, I don't think it's super surprising. By far, my most frequently given rating is 4 stars. 26% of the books that I read, I gave 4 stars to. And I do think that sometimes I'm a little bit generous. Like, I think some of these 4 stars that I give, like, realistically should be more like a 3.5. And so I'm kind of I don't know if this is like the right way to go or not, but I'm kind of trying going into the new year to be more uh like upfront with myself about how I feel about something, if that makes sense. If I feel like it really should be like 3.5. Like I wrote a review today for a book that I was like, I could have given it 4 stars, but actually that's really not how I felt about it. And so I'm trying to be a little bit more clear about that. And so I'm curious to see if that affects this breakdown next year. Um, yes. It is satisfying to give that one. It's true, because I do it really rarely, and usually it's because something actually made me angry. That is true. And in my personal rating scale, I use 6 stars to denote a favorite of the year. So in 2021, 29 books got a 6 star rating, which was about 7% of my reading. And that's actually lower than last year. Last year, I think 9 or 10% of the books that I read got a favorite of the year status. So it's interesting. I read more books, but a lower percentage made it to that level. So it's a pretty, 29 may seem like a lot, but with how much I'm reading, it's actually a fairly small percentage of the things that I'm reading. So yes, this is how I feel. And usually it's not significantly generous. It's usually by about a half star, but I'm like, yeah, which isn't the end of the world, but I'm just trying to be more aware of it, pretty much. Um, yeah, I can see that, like a lower tier 4 star. Yep, it's like where it's not quite there, but close. Oh, interesting, cool. I love that we're talking translated fiction. I think there are some really good things. All right. Lastly, I want to look at my most read authors. Okay, we got through this pretty quick. I'm happy about this. At the end, I'll like answer questions if people have them. But so this is all of the authors that I read at least 3 books from. So I did 3, 4, and 5. The most books I read from a single author was 5. So I had actually a lot of authors, 9 authors that I read 3 books from. We have Lord of the Rings, and a lot of this is some of this is trilogies, right? So we read the Lord of the Rings trilogy by J.R.R. Tolkien. This is funny, actually. The reason they're out of order, in case you're wondering, the Abercrombie series, is because I read The Blade itself for the first time in 2020 and then finished the series in 2021 and then reread The Blade itself in December for this read along I'm doing for my podcast with Leanna. So that's why those are out of order. But I read those 3 from Joe Abercrombie. I read 3 of the Bridgerton books from Julia Quinn. Those have been just kind of like fun, fluffy palette cleansers for me this year. Even though they have their problems, they hit that note for me. I read 3 books by Marie Lu. I read 3 books by Stephen King, although I only liked one of them. I really really liked The Eyes of the Dragon. Didn't really like the other two. I read 3 books by Seanan McGuire. One of them was with her pen name A. Deborah Baker. I read 3 books from P. Djeli Clark. That's that entire series, the Gin series. I read 3 Rick Riordan books and 3 Ruby Dixon books. So those are the authors that I read at least 3 books from this year. Um, Here are the authors that I read 4 books from. There were 5 of them. So one was Adriana Herrera, which is interesting. I've been really enjoying her romances this year, so I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's right, I did. I read 4 books from her, and those have been great." I read 4 books by Alyssa Cole. Those were earlier in the year. I had forgotten actually that I had read this many from her. I read 4 books by Gene Wolfe, but they're in these bind ups. So Shadow and Claw and Sword and Citadel are each a bind up of 2 books that make up the 2 main halves of the Book of the New Sun. I read both of those this year. I read 4 books by Robin Hobb. We did our read along of the Farseer trilogy, and then I also read her novella, The Willful Prince and the Piebald Prince. Willful Princess and Piebald Prince. All of those were wonderful. And then we did our read along of the Song of the Lioness Quartet by Tamora Pierce. So there you go. All the people I read that. And then lastly, I had 2 authors that I read 5 books each from. And this was interesting. One of them was Nora Roberts, which I had never read anything by her until this year. And I didn't realize that I read 5 books from her, but I guess I did. So I read 5 books by Nora Roberts and 5 books by N.K. Jemisin. We did a read along of the Broken Earth trilogy. I also read The Killing Moon and I read Far Sector. So yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting. I wasn't expecting Nora Roberts to be one of my most read authors this year, but there it is. And that is it. That is all of the stats that I have for you. I will stay on for a few minutes because got through this pretty quickly. So if anybody has questions or things you want to chat about, we can do that for a little bit. Um, but yeah, hopefully this was fun. I think it's interesting to take a look back and see how reading went. Um, okay, so this is interesting. Don't believe in inflation of grading. Yeah, yeah, I can see that. I can see that. And I think I try to be fair about it. I think it's just partly too that um the way that I think about ratings has maybe shifted a little bit too. Yeah, I give a lot of 4 stars too, but I do feel like I could see it be a little bit more balanced. Ah, yay! Oh, that's so exciting. Mystery of Black Hollow Lane, middle grade. Okay, cool. I have not read a favorite yet this year, so that's exciting. I've given my first 1-star rating of the year though. So, yeah, that's fun. Thank you, Beth. Yes, Brock Roberts. Oh, does he have the new one? I still am using the 2021 one, but Brock Roberts is this person who does the spreadsheet I use. So cool, cool, cool. Yeah, his spreadsheet is really great. It is, and it's very customizable. So I kind of edit it to be what I want it to be, which I think is pretty awesome. Oh, cool. Yeah, Book of the New Sun is interesting. Like Leanne and I really enjoyed that. That was interesting. I read them with her. I love Timora Pierce too. I don't know. I haven't read Mad Ship yet. Oh, I am planning though. I need to like make an official announcement, but I am actually planning a read along for the Live Ship Traders series beginning in March, and I've got some people who are going to be joining me for live shows. So, um, March, April, May for that trilogy. If people want to join, should be fun. I can see this. Yeah, that's fair. Oh, that's funny. I forgot. You're right because N.K. Jemison's first name is Nora. Oh, that's so weird. That had not occurred to me. What a strange little coincidence. Will I be adding any new stats this year? That's a good question. I think the new one that I added for 2021 was tracking which books I read were debuts. That was a new thing. I am now tracking whether an author is trans. Like that is a thing that I'm tracking as a separate in its own separate plot space. So that's a thing. I don't know that I have a lot of new stats I'm adding though. Um, I mean, a lot of it is, I think, just things that I'm interested in. Part of it is some of it comes with the spreadsheet that Brock's created, so I work off of that. But then if there are other things that I'm like, I want to work on reading more of this kind of author or more of this kind of book, then I'll find a way to track it in my spreadsheet for the year so that I can see how I'm doing with it. Okay, convenience store woman. I have heard good things about that. That's good to know. Had first two-star rating of the year. Starting off strong. Yeah. Yay! Oh, I love the Starless Sea. That's a really good one. That's so exciting. Yes, Winter's Orbit. Oh, I'm so happy. I love how many people are reading and loving that one. It's a really good one. Michael, they're such different books. It just depends on what you want. Like, do you want something that's more of a romance, or do you want something that's more gritty? Well, it's not like gritty, gritty, a little darker kind of like take down the patriarchy. Like they're very, very different books and they're both wonderful. So I'm not going to tell you which one, but like which one are you in the mood for? Is I think what I'm going to say. Uh yeah. Does anybody have any questions? Like now would be the time. I know like I get questions about stuff often in the comments and it takes like I'll sometimes it takes me like a week or two to get back to people. Um, just had 3 5 stars. Wow! Oh, Ray Bear, Redemptor, and Amari. Oh, those are so good. Those are all great books. That's exciting. Um, yeah. I can tell you, because I am vlogging it, my first one-star read of the year is gonna be controversial. I read my first Colleen Hoover book, Verity, and it did not go well. So, but I'm reading 2 of her books for this video. The other one is like very meh right now. Like this is I'm a little ways into this. I'm nervous that I'm also going to not like it. I don't think she's going to be the author for me, but yeah. Yes, I saw that. That's very exciting. Yeah. So Barnes and Noble has it as a pick. It's like buy one get one half off for those books. So that's a good option if you want to get a better deal on this one. Yes, Amari is awesome. Yeah, I know. Okay, gotcha. Yeah, she's a very polarizing author. So it's gonna be interesting. For a buddy read, which one might inspire more discussion? Um, I would say Iron Widow is gonna inspire more discussion probably. Like Winter's Orbit is like a book you might gush about if you're into it, but I feel like if you're looking for something that's a good discussion book, I would pick Iron Widow. Um, yes, there will be something. So that last year was the second year in a row where I'd done that thing for October where I pick 5 horror movies or like spooky movies and vlog watching them. So I will do that again in October. And then I'm not sure when exactly, but I would like to do something else. I'm not going to say too much about it yet, but like I have some thoughts on something else that I might do. We'll see. We'll see. But yeah, there's going to be something. Whether it's multiple things is to be determined, but yeah. Yeah, she's just polarizing. Yes, Iron Widow was so good. I loved Winter's Orbit. I thought it was great. That is, the people who love her love her. I think she's probably not the author for me. Like, I don't see myself picking up anything else by her after this, but I had a lot of people recommend these books in particular. And yeah, those of you who like my occasional ranty ranty videos will want to look forward to this vlog because I definitely do that a bit with Verity, and then we'll see how the second one goes. That was interesting. Bye. Thanks for stopping in. This was fun. Oh, cool. So I haven't seen Scream yet, which I may end up putting that on my list for this year because I really want to see want to see that. I didn't really watch horror movies growing up, which is why I've started doing this video project, even though like not that many people watch them, but I feel like the people who do watch them like them. So and it's fun for me because it gives me a reason to watch stuff that I hadn't seen before. Um yeah. Let's see, we're at like 40 minutes. If there's anything else, let me know if you want to like ask questions. And I can tell you, I'm reading this right now. I'm not super far in, but it's good so far. The Kindred by Alicia Dow. This is a YA sci-fi romance, and it's beautiful. And it's got lots of like twisty political things happening, which is fun so far. Yes. Okay. The Beautiful Ones is fantastic. It is a little like Northanger Abbey with a hint of like the Bronte sisters, maybe because it gets a little bit darker, but yeah, it's very good. I agree. I love that. Thanks, Beth. Yes, that's true. We do some fun extra things in Patreon. Yeah. Well, and Beth has been helping out too. She's been hosting weekly Discord meetups for patrons, which I've been popping into a lot of those like Monday nights where we can just hang out and chat. And so that's been fun. And we do like some movie nights a few times a year. And yeah, that has been fun. No, I did not see that. I need to look that up. Thank you. That's very exciting. I actually just bought some because I had some store credit from selling back some books, and I just like bought some new Octavia Butler books because I eventually want to read all her stuff. So I'm like adding to my collection. That's exciting. It's good. Octavia Butler is amazing. Her books are, like on their way to becoming modern classics. Very good. Yes. Okay. Let's see. All right. Well, I think if that's it, maybe I will end it there. Thank you everybody for hanging out with me and geeking out about all my stats. It's fun to take a look at them and see how things are changing and whether I want to shift anything. And this was kind of hopefully this was fun. It's kind of like a fun interactive way of doing it. Um, yeah. So maybe I'll do more of these again in the future with slideshows. It's fun. Yes. Yeah, or a mini series. I hope they do. I like the mini series projects for books. Yeah, yay. Thanks everybody. Have a great thank you. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, and I will see you later this week. Bye.